Hello, I'm Chuck DeVetter. I wanted to talk to you today about stepping out in faith. Often what we do is we spend time with God, we get in His presence, whether it's in church or individually, and His presence just draws that close and intimate relationship. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about beyond that. There's those steps of faith, those steps of just stepping out and just believing Him. There are times when God places in our heart, or He speaks to us, or we see a vision, or whatever it happens to be, where we know there's a place we're supposed to go towards, or a place we're supposed to step. And in that step, what happens is it seems to a lot of times go against what we want to do, or go against maybe where we have to press through our fears or something like that in order to make that step. But we know that's the direction He wants us to go, and so it takes faith to walk into those little steps, and sometimes they're big. But as we walk towards those steps, and as He shows Himself faithful in those, we build faith and we build a relationship with Him. Now, we don't do it so that He can earn anything for us. We just do it because we love Him. And as we make those steps, our faith grows and builds. And so I want to talk to you today about just growing our faith. I want to talk to you about the various steps that we can make to draw closer to Him, so that in those steps He can show Himself faithful. At the same time, we never put Him on a performance standard in all this. We just love Him based on who He is. And so an example of all this would be the current monetary system. Most people in today's monetary system, what they do is they let money lead and direct what they do. That's the Babylonian system. It's not God's system. Money is never meant to be in charge. I don't go to work so I can pay the bills, so then what happens is that I can go to work the next day so I can pay the bills. That's not God's system. That's the Babylonian system. So basically what happens is, if I make a decision to be led by God and not by money, then what happens is money is never the determining factor on whether I do something. Money is meant to serve me and not for me to serve it. So what that means is that there's that time and place when I just trust God and I walk out on what He calls me to do, and I trust Him that He's going to provide. And in the meantime, I do what He's called me to do. And so that puts me under a different system. That means that I don't ever go to work. I don't do anything that I'm doing it for the purpose of money. I do it because I'm called to do it, and I walk towards it. And money is never a motivator. It's never a determining factor. And when I all of a sudden, what that does is that frees me up, and it frees me up to be able to walk towards some things that basically are calls of God, but I couldn't do them because I'm thinking, well, geez, I don't have enough money, or that doesn't make sense, or geez, I have to wait till I have enough money. And those type of questions are really contrary to faith, because basically what happens is that as I step and walk towards those things that seem impossible and seem like they'd be supernatural to do, when I make those steps and walk towards those things, what happens is He provides the funds. He supernaturally provides the funds. It might not be exactly when I think He's going to provide it, but He will provide it when it needs to be provided, because His timing is different than my timing. And so as I think about money, and I think about the whole system of money, I know that our society is so engulfed in that Babylonian system and that money system that it's very, very difficult to step out of it. And one of the reasons it's difficult is if we begin to start trusting God for money, what ends up happening is that at some point in time it seems like He's not there. There's times when I'm stepping towards and saying, God, I'm going to trust You, and I step out and I leave my financial concerns and I take risk, whether it causes me concern for food, shelter, clothing, whatever it happens to be. I take risk. I say, I'm gonna trust You, God, and I'm gonna just lay myself out. I'm gonna die to myself. It's not about me, it's all about You. He promises to provide food, shelter, and clothing, and so His promise is true. And so I decide to step out in that. And when I step out in that, what happens is, even though He does do that, All right. What happens is a lot of times it doesn't seem like he's showing up. A lot of times it seems like all of a sudden I'm not going to have enough money, or there's going to be some difficulty, and sometimes there is actually some difficulty. And so what happens is there's that place where all of a sudden I decide to step out, and then there's that place where all of a sudden all that difficulty and believing in him and everything has to happen until I actually believe. And in that time when I'm stepping out and moving towards that, what happens is there's many times where there's crisis of faith, where all of a sudden I'm thinking, boy, he's not going to show up, or he didn't show up, and all those things. And what happens is that's really a training ground. It's a ground where all of a sudden, as I go to him and I hold on to him tight, and whether my heart's crying out and saying, God, I'm afraid, I don't know how this is going to happen. And as I make him my protector and provider, what ends up happening is that he shows himself faithful. He brings peace into my heart, and he brings rest in my heart. And that's when I start begin to see the supernatural things. And that's when I begin to see supernatural provision. And at the end of that, there's a place, and there never really is an actual end, but maybe the end of the beginning would be the better term. But at the end of that, what happens is that's when all of a sudden I begin to be able to walk in those things and believe in those things, because I know it deep in my heart that he's faithful. And that deep in the heart doesn't come as much from seeing him be faithful as that place where I'm grabbing tight onto him and holding onto him in the midst of my fear and in the midst of my concern, and letting him bring peace and rest in his presence and his love to my heart, so that I know that he's faithful. And so as I grow in faith, and as I'm willing to step out, and the more I'm willing to step out in a place by his word, not by something I come up with my own self, but something that he gave me. When I'm willing to do that, and the more I'm willing to step out, the more my faith can grow, and the more I choose to trust him, the more that he can do supernatural and incredible things through my life. And so I would encourage each one that faith and relationship with God goes way beyond that place in the church, and way beyond that place of worship, and way beyond that place of that presence of God. But it goes to the place of actually stepping out in all these things. Do I ever leave his presence? No, I seek to walk in the Spirit 100% of the time and worship him every second of the day. But at the same time, what happens is I make those steps that seem like, God, if I do this, I'm going to die, or if I do this, this will happen to me, or that'll happen to it. I just make those steps, and I say, God, I'm just placing myself under your trust, Father, or I'm placing my trust under you, Father, and I'm going to trust you. I choose to trust you. I'm choose to be dead in myself to the place where all of a sudden I no longer protect myself, but that you're my protector and you're my provider. And when I make that decision, and when I step out towards that, and I realize no matter what it looks like physically, I'm stepping towards that, and I'm not turning back, and I'm going to grab onto him tight, and I'm going to grab onto his heart. That's when I press myself into deeper faith, and that's when the supernatural things happen in my life. So again, thank you very much.